Recorded live at Talks and Tasting Studios, it's the Clerical Podcast, the podcast that shows you what's behind the collar. Let's go.
From the Talks and Tasting Studios, this is the Clerical Podcast, the show that
shows you what's behind the collar.
I'm Bollhagen.
And I'm Vicar.
And Peter's here.
Hey, Pete.
So we're this comes out tomorrow. This is one of the ones that we do that's actually right on time, really timely, right?
Yeah.
I got a beverage here. Do you have a beverage, Peter? You're probably just having water this morning.
Yeah, I'm drinking water.
I've got a pamplemousse LaCroix. I think that's fancy for grapefruit.
I mean, everything sounds fancier if it's sort of French.
Yeah, it's grapefruit. Maybe it's a different kind of fancy grapefruit that I'm not aware of. If
it's a special like strain of grapefruit specifically.
That could be. It's a Saturday morning. I'm going to be feigning some energy and excitement this morning.
Okay.
We all.
So, Vicar, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Doing all right?
Yeah.
Your time is kind of winding down now. Less than a month, a few weeks left.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of surprising how quickly that's gone.
Fast. So, today will be an interesting show. If you listen to the last episode, this will be a really interesting episode.
If not, it might be a little confusing.
Right. So you might want to listen a little to the last episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this will be fun. This is like way behind the collar, like way behind the curtain type of a thing. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah. So is this like a meta episode then?
Yeah. Peter, what's a meta?
He doesn't know what. Yeah, he doesn't know.
Yeah,
what that means.
I know. But that's for everyone else.
Of or relating to the self.
Okay.
So this is a podcast of or relating to the podcast.
But with good reason though, because we want to show one that about communication.
Yeah.
About working things through as brothers, and what that looks like in real life. So that being said, let's get started with the text. What am I preaching on, Vicar?
Let's see here. It's where are we? Is it Trinity 6?
Yeah, Trinity 6.
The reading is Matthew 5.
So let me give you some guidance on the other readings. So the Old Testament reading is Exodus 20, the Ten Commandments. The epistle reading is from Romans 6, which deals with baptism and being buried with Christ. And it talks about how that a new man arises again to walk in the newness of life. So the texts deal with, especially Jesus' words, I'll let you get to that in a second, of really a law gospel idea and really delineating that out. Because we'll go ahead and talk. I don't know, it's kind of a long one.
Yeah,
Do you think you can give some
whole thing?
Just give some highlights of it if you can.
Yeah, I actually looked at it ahead this time. So we've got Jesus during the Sermon on the Mount. He's talking about fulfilling the law, and particularly this section, I'd say, focuses on the fifth commandment, you shall not murder, and dealing with anger, and how we're supposed to be, putting aside that.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first part of that is important because he says, I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. And then he talks about heaven and earth not passing away until it is all accomplished. And he says something very interesting as he gets into this. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of God. So before we get into the next section, I think it's a very strong nowadays common misunderstanding by a lot of people that to preach the true gospel means you relax the law. We see that all the time. If you truly love others, then you don't talk about the Ten Commandments.
Yeah. Love the sinner, hate the sin.
Right. When this says, actually, it is loving and caring to teach the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
And by teaching the full force of the Ten Commandments, you are not actually hindering the gospel. When you actually preach the law, you're one, showing exactly how Jesus fulfilled that law. It teaches you to repent and to rejoice in the forgiveness that you have in Jesus, that he fulfilled the law. And it also then is very important in these to learn to, in this aspect, showing love to one another, forgiving one another, being kind to one another, and all those things as it gets through. Because I think even though most Lutherans of our ilk might say, well, we don't nullify the law, but we do reduce it quite often.
Yeah, that's a fairly human thing to do. I wonder if this is the right time to insert kind of a counterpoint to stuff Berg has said the last few times with Walther's Law and Gospel not being a homiletics text. I think this is why we use it in homiletics. Because for a lot of us, this doesn't come naturally. This idea that the law is a good thing, and there's a right time to use it completely, and just lay it on someone. And then there's a time where you're supposed to maybe say, okay, you've been there, now we go to this next part.
Right. I think that Berg's argument with that understanding is the fact that even taking the title, Law, Gospel, the sermon should be first you give them the law,
right?
Then you give them the gospel, like that's some sort of just a formula that you just kind of go through, which I still do in some way. And but sometimes you do law, gospel, law, gospel, law, gospel, or you do gospel, law. It's just
one of the members here has asked me with every sermon I've given where's the law in that, or where's the gospel in that, and I think every time my first part of the answer has been, well, each text is different. Some have a little more, some have a little less. Like this gospel text is actually pretty law heavy compared to, say, a few months ago with the healing of the Canaanite woman's daughter. That's very law. That's very gospel heavy there in comparison.
Right. We wouldn't want anybody to leave.
Yeah.
Not hearing the gospel, obviously.
Right.
Though.
Right.
But so I think I do like Berg's point as far as it's not just a formula, but you have to know it to be able to preach.
Yeah. 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 He as it goes as a technical book. Yeah. Walther's book is not how to preach. It's more the philosophy in some ways behind it.
Kind of like this. I'll put it this way. Okay. Let's say you really want to know something. You want to become a doctor or a surgeon.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have to take all these classes to know very intricately anatomy, what each part of the body does, how they work, what's important, what's not important, what things are dangerous, what things are not, and so you can know all the things that make the body work. Okay.
Yeah.
But then you have the art of actually doing a surgery.
Yeah.
So, so if say you have someone who knows all the anatomy and all those things, that would, of all the internal organs and everything that is necessary for surgery, it doesn't mean you yet know how to perform surgery.
Okay.
So all of those texts that a doctor would know to know the workings of a body are essential for them to be able to perform surgery. But if you have a surgeon who knows how those things work, but yet they don't know how to
actually do
it, you want the doctor, to know both.
Right.
And so Walther's Law and Gospel, it shows you very intricately how law and gospel works, how it can be applied, and all those things.
Which is very important.
Very important. But then when it comes to actually preaching those truths, then it becomes a little bit different. So that's how I would marriage those two thoughts that you and Berg are having.
Yeah. And I doubt he'd disagree with any of that.
Right. So in this text then, it really and it really points then to our relations with one another and how we talk to each other, and how he says, if you are offering a gift on the altar, remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there and go. And which is really important in this aspect as you look at that. If you love God This is something very important in the Reformation. How do you show love to God? By showing love to others.
Yeah.
And so yeah, as I look at this, obviously it's going to be a discussion on law gospel. It's going to be a discussion, a warning that loving and trusting in the gospel does not mean you nullify the law. It means that you rejoice that Jesus fulfilled it, and it teaches you that the law is, even though it kills us, it is actually good. It'll probably come with, and I do this every once in a while, an encouragement of people to actually look, go through their Rolodex in their mind. And this is something you can do as a listener. Who do I need to be reconciled with? Actively think about those things. Who is it that you've been putting off from reconciling with that you should? And it can be family, it could be friends. It happens a lot in families where, someone in the family I'm just waiting for that other person to come and say they're sorry. But if you look at the text, it really is something where you go. You don't wait, you go and be reconciled. So that's the direction I'm heading. Anything to add to that, Vicar?
I mean, I like looking at this. It's like this seems so straightforward, and I always feel like those straightforward texts are harder to write the sermon for, because it's a little bit like, well, just said that already. I kind of don't have to say it again.
And I like it in this sense, because I'm kind of a straightforward preacher. So for my style, you notice that when I worked through your sermon, was it the one sermon I said, you really don't need the first page and a half?
Yeah.
I said, what do you miss if you just start here? And you're like...
Yeah, and it worked better without it. It wasn't bad material, it wasn't necessary.
Right, because it got you into right where you need to be. Kind of like it's happened many times with the vicar where they give me a sermon and I ask them, well, what's your sermon about? And they say it like, well, what I'm trying to say is this. And I'm like, why don't you just say that?
Yeah, I think the last one was kind of like that. Whereas like the point was easier to get at afterward, after going through it once. It's like, yeah, there's an easier way to do that than
right.
What there was.
Right. All right, well, that brings us to, I guess, our next discussion. Do you have a top 12 list for this, by the way?
We could do that after it.
Okay. So, we had a little, what word would you describe? A little kerfuffle?
Sure, let's go with that. It'll make people look it up.
A kerfuffle. So, so Peter and I, we were feeling rambunctious a week ago. Wouldn't you say, Peter?
Indeed. And
by the way, I had some great leisure time. And what leisure time does is it makes you, if you do it right, you kind of really want to get back. And
yeah.
So it was the second episode I hadn't been on yet, and I wanted to be a part of the episode.
Understandable.
And the episode had already been recording. And so the producer and I came up to the idea, hey, let's still be on it. So we did a running commentary. And probably we should have checked that with you two. But time was of the essence.
Yeah. Thinking about it now, it's like if there had been just one or two more words, I think it would have clarified it. I'm not sure my reaction would have been quite as intense, but it would have made so much more sense. So yeah,
we should explain this.
We need to explain what happened.
Okay, go ahead, Pete.
So we recorded the episode, and we didn't tell anybody, thinking, hey, it'll be funny because Berg probably won't even realize until we talk to him next that we did it, and possibly Vicar won't, but I think Vicar's wife would, and then let him know. So, but that'll be funny. So we'll just do that, and we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it next episode. It'll be funny. So, we put that in. Side note, not that this helps the situation at all, but that took a long time to edit. The constant starting and stopping of the one episode into the other one.
Like
Bollhagen
two recording sessions, me like annoyingly asking him to throw in music.
But anyway, right? So we posted it, and then what happened Sunday morning after we posted the video?
So I'll be honest, I noticed that Vicar was a little off on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
He was a little thrown, and I didn't know why. I had no idea why.
Yeah, because I had no idea how to discuss it. Because and I think I'll say it this way, I made the mistake of listening to the episode before service, which I probably shouldn't do in any case.
Right.
Just because that's about an hour's worth of my mind's off track.
Especially, and I will say this, one thing I've really learned about doing a podcast, and maybe you've noticed this too, Peter, and you've certainly noticed, it is a very vulnerable experience.
Yes.
And one thing we've done here is we've leaned into it.
Yeah, which is probably one of the major strengths of this podcast. Like in the long run, yeah.
That we're allowed to be kind of
human.
Pull back, the veneer. What do pastors wrestle with?
Yeah.
What kind of struggles do we actually have?
Yeah.
Most Christian podcasts are very polished. This is what we're saying. This is what you do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get really, I don't think, a lot of them get into the nitty-gritty of how pastors relate with each other, the struggles we have, the joys we have in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
Which I think is what Hannah has expressed she likes. The really behind-the-collar stuff.
Yeah. And when it works great. And what happened last week, I think most appropriately is called a miscommunication. Because it wasn't.
So what happened?
Yeah.
So the service ended. I was actually in town, and so I walked out. I was one of the last ones out because I was in the back with my mom, and I gave, me and Bollhagen just giggling to ourselves, recording the episode. We thought we were funny, and so I kind of give a little grin to Vicar, and I say, "Hey, did you listen to the episode at all?" And what'd you say?
Yeah, I made it about 12 minutes in, and probably broke the 8th commandment 5 times. and
you
were like straight faced and like pretty upset. I could kind of tell, and I was like,
and he like looked at me in the eyes for about 10 seconds straight, which he's never done. And like, I'm not sure what this means.
Yeah. To go back to the point about, we lean into the allowing to be vulnerable. What happened in the podcast is you pegged one of my vulnerabilities, and what I heard initially, and this is probably where the problem is. What I heard initially seemed like an attack, and so my knee-jerk reaction was defensive.
Sure,
which was, to be completely honest, an overreaction.
Can I ask you what was the thing that triggered you?
What triggered me? Yeah, if we dare to use that word. Yeah. So we were talking the text. We had just got done reading it, and Berg looked at me and asked, what I would do if I were preaching on it. And you were completely right, Bollhagen. Where my reaction was coming from. That I didn't know that I was actually going to preach the text yet. Because this was 3 weeks ahead.
Something like that.
It was ridiculously far ahead. And also, I was on the spot suddenly in front of Berg, who I knew already had thought of the text based on how he asked the question.
And I think I was on the spot. In our commentary, we said, so Berg knows exactly what he wants to talk about. How long is he going to make them flub around until they hit his point so he can start talking?
Yeah. So I just had this one moment of, it came out as a sigh, and it was literally, I just was trying to gather my thought.
Mm-hmm.
And the commentary made it sound like you were finding it to be humorous, which is my misinterpretation. That's where everything went wrong.
Right. Because what I found humorous is, and we've talked about this,
yes,
is the fact that I find Peter can vouch for this. I find personalities to be fascinating.
Yeah.
And endearing. So, like, if someone has a quirk or something, like when Berg, he is so interesting, and that's what I love about doing a podcast with him.
Right.
And I love working with vicars who have all sorts of different personalities that I find very fascinating, and they're endearing to me. And so what you thought was an attack on you, was really actually, for my part, was born out of care. You know, those tense moments that a vicar has, not in a mean way.
Yeah. If you had said, that it, instead of just it brings me great joy, but that it brings me great joy to see him so honest.
Right.
Like, because then it would have been like, okay, it's that seeing the personality side.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it still would have been like, I don't like that you're prodding at me like that, but I get it. I still probably would have been a little bit salty about it, but not quite as angry about it.
Right.
There still probably would have been a discussion. It would not have been the kerfuffle that it became.
So Bollhagen and I came home from church, and we talked about it for a while, and we were like, I feel like we were okay. Did we do something wrong? I mean, like,
and that's a vulnerable part on our side, because it's out there,
right?
And not only is it something out there that you were very uncomfortable with, and then I don't want to be like the mean guy who's just like beating people up.
Yeah,
or
the point of the
like,
podcast isn't to be like,
right?
To
truth be
upset
told,
people,
for the listener, sitting in the chair by Berg and I, and Peter actually, can be a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Berg, because he is a living dictionary.
Oh yeah.
Right? Me, I'm a little physically imposing.
Yeah. Well, you're also the supervisor.
And the supervisor, right? And it could be a little brash. I say what's on my mind. But in my mind, all that stuff doesn't work for me if I don't also show my own vulnerabilities, which I try to do as well.
Yeah.
If I'm making fun of the fact that I have attention issues, I'm not a good reader, for example. I lean into that. Because I think...
Go ahead.
Because I think a lot of times, and we've talked about it, is because I have my quirks, you have your quirks.
Yes.
It really helps people when you're open and honest about those quirks, rather than putting up a veneer,
right?
And then people not understanding.
And I'd like to think that I've usually done a pretty good job with that. It's a little harder on a podcast since it's an audio medium, and I'm not a very audio person.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I said, the knee-jerk reaction was, it sounded like it was just a cheap joke. Which, that was, like I said, I wasn't even fully listening properly. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure in context I could have, if I didn't know any of the background, I could have gotten that figured out.
Okay.
Sure.
But
so anyway, Bollhagen and I are at home, right? And we're talking about it, and we feel terrible, but we're also trying to figure out, like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, because we don't want to do it again. Yeah,
we're talking about it off and on all day long.
And then Hannah, we get a text from Hannah. Can you read that text from Hannah?
Yeah. Bollhagens, you always come up with new ways to leave me speechless. So, again, me and Bollhagen are in the throes of guilt and also trying to figure out what we did wrong and also trying to figure out what we should do, right? So I immediately reply, what's that supposed to mean? Kind of prodding Hannah to say, like, okay,
because we're really like I joked about you fishing. We're fishing here. We're like, we're
fishing.
And while this is all going on, I'm still
you're stewing,
grappling with it, which for me works kind of in the opposite direction, because the longer I stew on it, the more pressure it's going to end up being.
Mm-hmm.
And Hannah, I don't want to out Hannah too much, but she says something, you're so innovative, always pushing the boundaries of what a podcast is, showing what's behind the collar and under the podcast producer hat. Real talk.
Right.
Yeah.
And then can you read the next?
Because here I am still frustrated.
Yeah.
And then,
right. So Vicar drops a bomb.
Yeah.
Vicar drops this bomb.
I'll admit, I've never been really afraid to pull the pin on a hand grenade in this sort of situation. But it's usually one of those things where it's really hard to walk back from.
Right.
So this is now Monday morning.
Yeah.
So it's been going on for 24 hours now. Everybody's been stewing on it. Vicar says, if we're going to call the additions to last week's episode innovative or real talk, then I probably won't be available for the next recording. What happened was condescending and rude, and it was done publicly.
So
clearly we worked through that since I am here at the next recording.
Yeah,
that's right. Which is why we're talking
about it. Yes.
Our point is hopefully is not that we're just really self-involved in here.
No,
but what it is because the text we've talked about working through things, going to your brother.
Yeah,
I want to use this as an opportunity to say, this at this point could have really blown up.
Oh yeah, it could have been.
In a lot of places, it could have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, depending on which way it could have gone, we could have I could have said I was done and called it quits.
Right. And
it could have been the end of my vicarage.
And a vicarage supervisor could have said that's insubordination.
Yeah. That was a very aggressive thing for me to send.
Well, and even then you could go a layer above, like, the person who watches the supervisors goes, "Oh, you're mistreating your vicar. What are you doing to this guy?"
Yeah. Although I don't think he was paying much attention because he's been doing a whole lot of other career-related stuff now. So
that's true.
Side note.
So that led
a couple
to
more discussions happened. We talked a little bit more, and Bollhagen called me again. We talked a little bit more about it, and we said, "Let's pull the episode for now." So
because Hannah had another one that she thought that maybe there could have been parts that were inappropriate.
Yeah,
but I didn't know if it was. She thought how much she thought it was inappropriate at the time, or inappropriate now that she saw your reaction because she's on the chain,
right?
Would she?
So
you know what I'm saying? If she's trying to help you feel better, like you're not, because I can imagine, because Hannah's a very caring heart.
Yeah,
she wouldn't want you to feel alone in your feelings.
Well, and the way that her text was worded could go either direction. Like I was even stewing over. It's like, what does that mean? Like, does she think this is good, or is she kind of like that backhanded sort of compliment where it's like, well, that was interesting, but you probably shouldn't have. And I'm not even sure her answer clarified it.
So
yeah,
she needs some cookies. We have to get her cookies.
We actually do.
Yeah,
I mean, she stepped up. She stepped up. She proved that she was more than just a listener. There.
That was, that definitely helped our conversation along. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine, talk about intimidating. She's respectful of pastors, and she doesn't want to.
Yeah.
So
we pulled the episode, and
so really, if you were listening, like it was here, but now it's gone, and I think someone posted, "Hey, I tried to find your episode, I couldn't find it." Well, it's back on now.
Yep.
And so we pulled it, and then my personality style, like in a situation like that, is I want to go fix it.
Yeah.
So I said, "Hey, texted Vicar, can we talk about it?" Because that's I guess how I like to do things.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure you were ready to talk about it yet.
Probably not completely.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm probably the exact mirror opposite. It takes me quite a while to, I guess, gather all of the appropriate thoughts and to find that clear path through it.
So what was, I think, the biggest thing? I think on my part, I should have maybe been more kind in my commentary, and realized that even though in my mind it came off as from a place of your endearing qualities, right?
Yeah.
Because I find personalities interesting and joyful. That you have to be honest though. That sigh is such a perfect sigh. I mean the comedic, the comedic sound of that perfect raw emotion.
Yeah, you were not wrong in how you pointed it out. I can agree with that.
It's like I was listening to this real time, and that little gem just like.
And since you've been spending enough time catching that stuff, you understand exactly what it meant. Yeah, no, you weren't wrong. That's maybe the point.
So at this point, by the way, I am also, because you had mentioned that you thought that Berg would be really upset too.
I'll admit I'm actually kind of surprised because I did think that the commentary, at least that first like 15 minutes worth, it's like they're kind of doing a whole lot of stuff that sounds like it's poking fun at everybody.
Right.
And I kind of couldn't see how someone wouldn't be like at least a little bit perturbed at it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and so Berg actually listened to it then.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I don't think there's anything offensive here.
He didn't,
on his part, at least.
Yeah. He didn't give you a suggestion for better music?
No. He said that he actually, when he heard the...
I mean, I could see him doing that, right?
But part of it is, too, like, Berg's been elbow deep in this podcast from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And he understands that...
Yeah.
That, like I've said before, a podcast just by myself would be horrible. And a podcast with just him would be interesting, but it wouldn't quite have the pizzazz that we each bring to the table.
It would be a bit more academic sounding.
We need each other.
Yeah.
So he really understood that aspect of it, and so he said when I brought up the hoity-toity music, he said he laughed. You know, he thought that was funny.
Yeah. And I'll admit, I wonder how much my reaction's just that kind of look over my shoulder aspect of vicarage, where it's like, how are people viewing me? And I feel like I haven't quite gotten over that.
Okay, which is part of my thing I have to do as a supervisor. I have to point out how people are viewing you in an accurate way.
Yeah.
Then we had, I think at the heart of the issue was, and if you've noticed this, I really wasn't going to give it a rest until I wasn't just going to let this sit and stew.
No.
You know, which is the temptation. The temptation would be, okay, we have this thing. It's uncomfortable. We'll just get through the next month or so.
Yeah, but I'll admit, I wasn't really going to want to do that either.
Right.
Like, there had to be some sort of resolution to it. And the sooner, the better.
I think the biggest thing was, for you, is, one, we did point out some of your vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily fun.
No, it's never fun.
And two, I think I try to do that on vicarage for the sake of, sometimes I run with former vicars, where everything is, they're not pushed so much in some directions that make them uncomfortable. And so when they're pushed in a direction as a pastor, it becomes very uncomfortable for them because they never experienced that kind of pressure before. So there are certain times where I actually purposely put the vicar in some uncomfortable situations to get them through those, where you have the protection of me knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
So I know certain times that a vicar's might react or be uncomfortable, and so I'm aware of that.
Yeah. It's kind of like conditioning.
Right. So if, for example, a vicar, I push them to the point where they might overreact about it, I'm not angry. It gives me something to talk about. And I think this incident particularly, as uncomfortable as it was, has been a huge growing moment.
Oh, it has.
For you.
It has.
And so, but the biggest thing is, I think, something we all do, that is reading the intentions of someone else.
Yeah.
Right? You read into it. It was just a cheap laugh.
Yeah. If I had taken it just at face value, which was probably the best way to go with it, I mean, I could still probably call it just a cheap laugh, but it's just because that's just what he finds interesting.
Because I think you were kind of surprised when I said that. It's because I actually care about you, and it was an endearing thing.
Yeah,
and that's why it brings me joy.
It took a bit to unpack that, but and thinking back now, looking at everything, trying to examine everything, it's like, okay, that actually makes some sense now.
Mm-hmm.
That actually explains quite a few different things that I've seen there. It's like, okay, I don't get that.
Mm-hmm. And so after their discussion, you had some more time to think.
Yeah.
And you wrote a letter to me, which I didn't quite understand completely.
Yeah. Part of that, and that's why I've actually got a top 12. I have, this is actually difficult for me to do. Verbalizing.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some public speaking classes because it's difficult. I've joked that, the podium or the lectern is actually the scariest piece of furniture because public speaking is not fun for me. And so being able to, on the spot, think and speak is not always the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
However, writing it down is much easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of why. Also, because I knew it's like if I'm writing it down, I'm less likely to fly off the handle and then probably say something that is going to get me in trouble.
Right.
And this close to the end of Vicarage, I really shouldn't do that. At least if I can help it.
And but I think one thing that was good about it, even if you hadn't given me the letter, it was a way of processing.
Yes.
Because not only do you process while you're writing the letter, I think what you actually did was after you have wrote it, you did more processing about what you actually wrote.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what it went?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I used it kind of like as a vent in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because after, I'd say probably by that afternoon, it's like, yeah, I was actually pretty calm about the whole thing.
Okay.
It's like, I think I'd come to grips with it. It's like, okay, I get it. I get where they were going. There's no reason the podcast has to stay off. It's like, I'm not quite sure how to resolve it, in terms of the interpersonal relationship yet, but that's okay. We can figure it out.
And I was not going to put the podcast on without your blessing if you felt that way. I was not going to put it on.
Right. I think you even offered to edit it out.
Right.
But then it'd probably be a little bit odd, and that's more editing work for Peter, which is not fair.
Not at all.
Especially after...
In the future, if there's something like that, guys, let me know, and I can. If you want it cut out, I can do that. It's a little bit of wizardry, but it's what I have to do.
But you're our wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the wizard, so it's my responsibility.
And by that point, we'd already talked enough about it that, like I said, I was at peace with whatever happened, and I'd expressed what it was that I had not been able to, because that's the biggest thing I've struggled with, being able to actually communicate. And it's like, we've got an opportunity here.
All right, so I think this will be a kind of a thing.
Yes.
An interesting thing, okay? As we go look at this then, I want to talk about what did I learn about you and what did you learn about me? So.
Okay.
All right. What I learned about you is how deeply you think about those things and how much you actually wrestle with those discussions more than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how much you care about your work and your job. And so for me, this whole thing, even though the whole thing was not fun, I was upset, you were upset.
Yeah.
Peter was upset. Berg was mostly confused.
Yeah.
Hannah was probably a little, I don't know. Oh boy, what did I step into?
I'm surprised Bert didn't say anything.
Oh, if I'm Bert, I'm not touching that. Are you kidding?
Good point.
And so, there were in the process. So I never asked, what did you learn about me?
Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest thing is, how genuine everything you're saying actually is. Because like you said, I am always trying to read into what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumption, which was wrong, was that whatever you're saying, there's something more than just the face value.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few times where there is anything beyond that. Like you're open in a way that I've never been able to quite achieve yet.
And I'm not a manipulative person.
No.
I'm just I raised you that way, kind of like where you never really were left wondering what Dad really thinks.
Yeah, I think either you taught me to do the same or it's genetic, because I'm the same way. I speak what's on my mind, and you always know how I'm feeling.
Well, you have two very, very open conversationalist parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a lot of, just the environment you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I can look at my home life growing up. My dad is even quieter than I am in a lot of aspects. So it didn't come, naturally as example.
Mm-hmm. Now that me being open, like I am, it also comes with the responsibility to not just be blunt. In the sense of, if people don't, if it comes from a place where, and I guess what bothered me kind of most about that incident, if I'm honest, is the fact that that you somehow thought that I really had some sort of ill will against you.
Yeah.
You know, that
and that's I'm not even sure how to explain how I got to that, because I don't think there's really anything I can look back on this past year that would clue me into that's what was going to happen. Like, I'll admit, your sense of humor I find a little weird.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get the baby mask.
Yeah.
I can honestly admit that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But there's nothing really that says, oh yeah, his sense of humor is malicious. Like, no, maybe a little childish, but not malicious.
But I don't. You know, the entire year I try to show a lot of care for the vicar and his family.
Yeah.
And so to think that somehow I want something bad to happen to your ill will is not really.
Yeah. Yeah. So I very much learned the lesson of I shouldn't just jump to conclusions. I should have found a way to ask about it first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I learned. It's like I struggle with being able to, to start the conversation with people, and, you're not as unapproachable as I'm always afraid of. And some of that's, like I said, you're my supervisor.
Right.
There's this part in the back of my head that's used to, okay, you're the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Going, just chit-chatting with you is not, necessarily normal, which isn't accurate. This isn't like some sort of, regular job somewhere that, there's the boss in his office and then all the peons on the factory floor.
Right. There's a school of thought of vicar-supervisor relation that, where there should be some distance. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've been able to tell I'm not of that school.
No.
Because the idea is if you get too close to the vicar, it prevents you from being honest with the vicar. And to me, like, I'm just the opposite in the sense of if I'm kind of open about the vicar, what's going on, and if he can actually see that I want what's best for him, and he can see my intentions that I actually truly do care about the vicar and his family, then they are actually going to take what I say
a little more seriously.
A little more seriously. Like, it's not going to be like, oh, he wants me to do this. It's kind of like when I go through a sermon and say, whenever I ask or suggest edits, my first question after all those, or before I leave your office, is I say, do you think that makes it a better sermon?
Right.
Where I don't just want you to change it and then not agree with it and push through. I want you to see that I care about you and what you're preaching, and I want you to be confident about what you're preaching. Yeah. So in the same way, when it comes to the way I like to mentor a vicar, I like for it to come from a place that they don't have to trust my motives or what I'm trying to do so much as I can be honest and open as a friend would. Not that I'm like your best friend or your bestie, I'm not sure if we were at the sum together, we would be hanging out all the time together.
Probably not.
Because I'd be on the basketball courts in the weight room and but that's the joy of
and that's one of the great things about this location, whether I'm talking the congregation itself or even just the circuit. One of the things I kind of expected was I'd be treated like an assistant, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm pretty sure everyone's treated me like a colleague.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in the congregation has treated me like I actually know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Which has been great for, the confidence side of being able to do, the tasks of learning this.
Mm-hmm. Because the humbling thing about vicarage is if you have insecurities about stuff, they're going to come out.
Yeah. Such as last week, yeah.
Right.
I'm glad I have the camera because I looked at Vicar and he had like PTSD eyes staring off in the distance.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think that I'm easy to read, but I really don't know.
Well,
and also, I just, when I'm processing, I stare off into space, and it's that 1,000-yard stare. And then it doesn't help anybody.
Right. Kind of an example, kind of like we talked about that stare, right?
Yeah.
You stared at me for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And you thought you were sending a very clear message to me.
Some of it was I was actually trying desperately to take the time to calm myself down.
Okay.
And to think through words instead of actually just blurting out what was on my mind.
Sure.
Because doing so right after service while there's still congregation members within 10 feet of us, I really shouldn't prove that I do know how to swear like a sailor, especially not while vested up.
Okay.
Probably not appropriate.
So, but I like how you wanted then to use this podcast up as an opportunity for others to learn about, for me, because we each have a different viewpoint and how we react to situations and people, I have a tendency to think, if I think it's funny, well, obviously everyone has to think it's funny. Or if someone took offense, if I wouldn't take offense, then someone else shouldn't take offense. And that's kind of the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
And I think you too, in the same way, thought, because I would, if something happened to me,
yeah, if it'd be offensive to me,
if someone poked fun at me, I would laugh.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a disconnect too. But at the heart of it, going back to this text, we weren't going to use it. We made an effort to make sure that one, we grew from it, both of us, and we made sure that we use this opportunity to know each other better, to make the rest of Vicarage go. It's going to go even better now.
Yeah.
And I think, as hard as that was, we use that awkward, difficult situation to become better.
Yeah.
And to better understand. Not to, we made a conscious effort not to allow that to be something that, tears us apart. And that's why we wanted to talk about it on the air, not to be so self-involved, but to maybe show how these things that could have gone bad.
Oh, yeah.
How with understanding and talk and care and concern for someone else can lead to actually better outcomes. Not that you should seek those arguments so that you have them, but when they do come up, to use them.
Yeah.
Is that something you learned?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of why I was perfectly happy with doing this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if anything else, it's going to help someone else.
And if you're, and I think I told you this, it's important then as a pastor sometimes to every once in a while to be able to talk about your vulnerabilities, so that people don't misread them.
Yeah.
So for example, I've made well aware. I think people know when I talk about my attention issues or whatever.
Yeah.
That I don't just joke about it on the podcast. I do not in a. I don't joke about it as hard in places.
Right.
But I'm willing to at times show some vulnerability, not using it as an excuse, but so people understand and don't misread certain things as me being malicious, or something like that. Yeah. And I think we talked about how you can be quiet.
Yeah.
People, if you don't say, I'm a quiet person, or some of the things I do in small talk are hard for me or whatever. If you don't say those things, people will just think, oh, he's quiet. Does he really care?
Yeah. I have a feeling the last couple months I might have got out of that habit a little, and that might be some of what added some edge to the reaction I had.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm usually open enough about this being a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, the last couple months, I think I might have been a bit in a rut in terms of just work-related stuff and doing everything. And maybe some of it's because of the 2 weeks where you were out and I was here. And it was just easier to be like, okay, blinders on and just do what has to be done, and kind of neglected the bigger picture in a few aspects.
So yeah, I think it's a marvelous example of that.
Yeah.
So Peter, would you like to put a bow on this?
Well, yeah, and I think as that wasn't a fun thing to go through. It's great that we're through it now. I think we almost have a playbook for if this happens again on a podcast.
I have a feeling you're not going to run into someone quite as introverted as me.
Oh, maybe not next year because we know who's coming next year, but
that's true.
You never know. All sorts.
So that being said, do you think that being on the podcast ultimately is a positive thing for the Vicar's experience?
I think so.
Learning,
yeah,
and like I said, pushing you in certain directions.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
Oh, and I wanted to say, Bollhagen, I think you learned a lot as far as how to get closer to your vicar. So what we know now is for the next vicar, immediately do what we just did, and then everything goes a lot quicker. And then you've got
right.
He's not going to have to deal with any pandemic lockdown stuff.
Right. You got 9 or 10 months of really good bonding time instead of just the 1 month we're going to have now.
So at the very beginning of vicarage, get him really, really mad and really...
Yeah.
I'm not
and then hammer it out.
I don't think you want to do that with the next guy. He's a hunter.
All right. So thank you for that discussion. I hope the listener found it interesting. And I want that to motivate you, listener, to seek out and to be mindful of healing and mending relationships. So, all right, that brings us to a top 12 list that Vicar gets to do.
Yay.
Peter, play the intro.
Enough nonsense. It's time for Bollhagen's Top 12.
I'm an introvert. And as I joke, I'm a terminal introvert. That's because the last time I took the test with the personality thing, it was 100% introverted. I think I might have even put that in my first email. So the whole idea that this is 12 tips for encountering an introvert in the wild.
Number 12.
Be patient. People think they are patient, but most of us who are Americans are really bad at being patient. With an introvert, being patient means it might take more than 5 minutes to answer to your text, even if you're just expecting a yes/no response. Being an introvert means often being introspective, and that means thinking through what they will say or write before they go for it. It also means that when they do speak, there's a good chance it will not be a quick statement. So sit back, listen, and let them finish their thoughts, which I think we've seen a lot with Berg.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, my personality is not to be patient.
I think ultimately that is a human thing, though.
For example, we had a bare patch in our lawn. I planted some grass seed.
Yeah.
I literally was looking. Is it growing? For days. A couple times a day, I'd look out the window or go to see. 2 days after I planted, it's not going to be growing yet, but I'm checking. Is it growing? Is it growing? And it grows a little. Is this going to be a lawn? Or is it not? It looks so thin. Checking. Kind of like on Christmas. And I give presents, for Christmas too.
Yeah.
What do I want them to open my presents that I got for them first? I'm a weirdo. Okay.
Number 11.
Don't interrupt. Another
okay.
Yeah, another un-American thing, especially with all of the social media. And while social media has been a great advantage for introverts to communicate, the rapid-fire way that it works can often leave them behind, especially when you see those 3 dreaded dots that show someone's commenting. Yeah, because as soon as you see the 3, that or the quick comment,
ellipsis,
it kind of
right?
shuts off. Oh yeah, ... I mean, I'll admit I've had this happen to me a lot where I'm messaging, and it's usually with a family member who might remain nameless, and they'll be like, ... It's like, okay, I gotta wait for the response, and it's an hour later. It's like, where's the response?
Number 10.
Don't ask overly complicated questions. And now, complex questions are fine sometimes. And some people like good mental challenges. But what this means by complicated questions are those that sound like it starts as a simple single option question or a yes/no type answer, but then it has multiple options. So it'd be starting with the seemingly simple question of where do you want to eat, and then following up with an option and then another. Those sorts of questions take a lot of process time.
Mm-hmm. And those, as a pastor, those come up quickly. For example. where you have a quick yes or no question.
And then it devolves into...
Right, and there's so much behind that yes or no question.
Yeah.
So, for example, I remember one time there was my first week, I got slammed because flowers. Where do you want these flowers for your ordination? You're the pastor. Where do you want them? Like, I didn't care at all.
Right.
But there are two sides. One side was going to be very upset with one of the answers. And they said, make a decision. And whatever decision I made, someone was going to be upset.
Yeah.
Because one pastor said, the flowers have to be there. The other pastor said, the flowers have to be there. And so this was a test. Now, which pastor are you going to be more like? And
I mean, can we just split the difference, put them somewhere completely different?
And you know me well enough, right? Rather than the flowers, what's my reaction, Peter? Why can't we all?
Why? I just want everybody to be happy.
Which is something that Peter says to me in our family situations to make fun of his father.
Number 9.
Don't ask, what do you want to do? Which open-ended questions are just always dreaded by many people. They're not always bad, but particularly for this sort of a situation with an introvert, it can be. And it can be even for a non-introvert. It's one of those kind of brain freeze moments. The deer in the headlights look. And sometimes, the possible reaction is that blank stare. One of the things that bugs my wife is, the question when she asks, what are you thinking? And the answer is nothing. Because it's literally nothing.
Right. And I'm a lot of that. But sometimes I'm either thinking about nothing or I'm thinking about something so stupid
that it's not worth voicing.
Yeah. Random thought, by the way, because I have random thoughts. The other, when I was going on an airplane recently, can you explain this? Because you used to work with airplane
on an
parts.
Airplane?
Yeah. So the overhead bin, right? They put the small luggage in the overhead bin.
Yeah.
Someone put a gallon of milk in there. And I'm like, did I just see that? Anyways, continue with your list.
Okay.
How did they get a gallon of milk past security?
I have no idea. They put a gallon of milk in the overhead compartment. I can't explain it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways.
I don't know.
That's an open-ended question for you.
So I'm not sure there is an answer for that question. It's a social experiment. That's what we'll call it.
But you can't even refrigerate it.
Number 8.
Ask what they like to do. And this is kind of a contradiction from the previous one, except it isn't. Not asking whether they want to participate in something, but the actively taking interest in what they are interested in. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So this is telling an introvert that you're brave enough to let them take you on a tour of their world. This would be the place to probably remember the song from Willy Wonka.
Mm-hmm. Which is?
I can't sing it. I know that I can't sing it. I'm not Gene Wilder.
But I'm not sure
You don't know the song? If you saw it, you'd remember. You can't forget. It scars people.
Number 7.
Don't force them. I mean, nobody likes pressure except for perhaps diamonds. And introverts tend to not like pressure at all.
That's going to be one of your challenges.
That is going to be one of my challenges. I had no illusions about how difficult pastoral ministry is going to be with some of my personality quirks. Yeah, it's just been acute in the last couple months. Anyway, being forced to talk can be difficult at times. And a lot of people dislike public speaking. It just doesn't, for a lot of us, come naturally. But yeah, forcing the pressure.
It actually didn't come naturally for me.
Yeah. I may have met one person in my whole life who probably it did come naturally.
It does now.
Maybe two. Yeah. It takes a lot of practice. We had discussed that too, because on campus there's a public speaking group, and I was actually president of it last year. And anyone who would have met me 5 years ago would be like, "There's no way."
Right.
But I also have a couple of classmates who are completely baffled. It's like, wait, he's an introvert? He's so talkative.
Number 6.
Slow down so they can interrupt. Going back to the whole, Americans being impatient. Because of that, our culture tends to talk very fast. We talk over each other. We interrupt each other when there's something to say. Kind of the loudest voice wins. And if we've watched anything of the news in the last year, that's how it goes.
But if I can mention, since I'm like the antithesis of this.
Yes.
And I
figure there's a lot you want to comment on with each one of these.
Well, yeah, because I interrupt. And the reason why I interrupt is I have to get a thought out before I lose it.
Yeah.
Or like kind of like when my wife has learned that if she asks me to do like one or two things on my way out of the door, then I will forget my wallet, or I won't remember to do the other things. So if I have a thought, I have to like get it out there. I have an intent to feel like I need to, and it comes across interrupting because if I don't, then my brain will work on something else and move forward to something else.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean that quite, although like I said, I'm the exact opposite with it. And there's been times where I've been very frustrated and kind of blurted out angrily when I'm trying to say something, and there'll be like 4 or 5 people. This happens at home a few times, actually, unfortunately, but that's children. They come and it's like, oh, I have something, or I need to ask something, and I just trying to finish one sentence.
And I would say your daughter is like me.
Yes. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Yeah. No, what I mean by interrupt is in the conversation sphere mostly. The way that we could describe conversation, most people think it's like a tennis, back forth, and really quick, and it's not necessarily easy for someone on the introvert side of the perspective to do that. Because we feel that it's rude to interrupt in the same way, or what we would see as interrupt. Mm-hmm. So having, I've been told I should just get a sign that to hold up and be like, I have something to say, to like have a visual cue. It's like, hey, look, I want to be part of the conversation. I don't know how to jump in.
And I'm like, when that happens, I'm like with children, how I like to finish what they're saying because I get impatient.
Yeah. I notice it most actually with when Berg is on and he's on a roll and there's something where it's like, hey, I've got something I could say here. But either one, I can see he's going to get there himself, or two, he's moving fast enough that by the time I would insert it, we're like 10 minutes later.
And I would argue Berg is, I think, the most impossible person to interrupt I think I've ever met.
Yes.
Not in a bad way. It's just
in a bad way.
He gets trucking and then...
Yeah, once he's on a roll, you don't stop him until he stops.
And you don't want to step in for that train.
Right,
no.
Yeah.
No. And that's why I would say, from my perspective, it always feels rude to interrupt because, like, yeah, I'd have a point that'd be interesting to say, but he's got this. I don't want to throw him off.
Number 5.
Don't assume they are rude. That's one stereotype I do remember running into, the idea that, being an introvert, oh, you're just rude, or you're being reclusive, or you don't like social interactions. They don't want to talk. When it's very intense, like it's avoiding eye contact even, which I do sometimes. Mm-hmm. I find that, yeah.
So that would be one of those things where, as a pastor, you're gonna have to say, I think.
Yes.
Say.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to point out that I'm not.
Yeah.
It may come across.
Yeah.
That.
I'm gonna have a very, very long, detailed, and vulnerable, announcement at that first church service that I actually am at, admitting it's like here are my struggles. Please forgive me ahead of time, and know that I'm not trying to be rude. I just don't know how to talk to you yet. Because it's not just being the shy, quiet type that the stereotype isn't rude. It's just that we appreciate time apart from groups of people. Mm-hmm. The whole recharge idea, that because social interactions are exhausting, but I think for a lot of people that probably is the case. Like we're opposite personalities, but I think we were both completely wiped out on Easter.
Yeah. I'm wiped out after an afternoon of visits.
Yeah.
Number 4.
No sudden movements. And I don't necessarily mean the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, although that's still good advice, but rather the idea of springing something on them. Now, if it's requiring a rapid change of plans, it's going to be likely meeting that deer in the headlights look, which we don't really want.
By the way, have you noticed that I'm well aware of this for you?
Yes.
And yet, what? I still do it?
Yes.
Because
There are times, and that's
because I'm pushing,
and that's part of my point too. Yeah, that there are times where it's required, and there's certain tasks and vocations where it is necessary, and it's a skill that to poke on the other side, to poke at the introvert. Yes, they need to learn it, and it needs to be cultivated. But
because it's funny, the endearing moments.
Yes,
that sigh. That's the same reaction when I say something like, "Hey, Vicar, can you close the meeting with a prayer?"
Yeah, and that's what it was. But in terms of like the social world, like interacting with them, the kind of like if someone were to come by the office, poke their head in and say, "Hey, we're all going to go and do this in 5 minutes. You're in?" I'd be completely, thrown for like the next hour.
Right.
That's that sort of thing. There are times where suddenly everything has to shift. We've had a few of those instances already with visit related stuff too.
Right.
So yeah,
someone's dying. You need to go see him.
And it is a skill set that needs to be cultivated and is very important and appropriate, especially for the pastoral role.
Right.
But like I said, in terms of the social interaction stuff, that one's a little more.
And I'm all about the adventure. I'm like, the fight. Oh, let's go.
And there are times that spontaneous action is fine.
I think the biggest example of that is the time you and I ended up buying tickets the day before the Iowa State championship game. Have I much talked about that on the podcast? I don't remember. Vicar, do you know about this?
I don't, but I'm wondering, did you at least get good seats?
Yes.
Yeah.
We wound up with good seats.
Okay.
We don't need to get into that part.
Just curiosity.
Can I tell a life hack?
Okay, go ahead.
So the life hack is, do you know how you can go on an app and buy tickets?
Yeah.
Right? So when you're in the arena and they sell tickets, you can buy tickets for specific seats up until
halftime.
After the halftime.
Okay.
So you can go on an app and say, "Oh, these tickets are still for sale," meaning no one's in those seats.
Ah.
So we had okay seats, and then we got
and then
a little better
and then
seats.
happened to find better seats.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't been sold yet.
But
and at that
for
point,
the
they
listener,
might not have been.
This was my idea. So we're sitting in the seats, and my dear father, anytime anybody walked down it was right in like the middle of two aisles. Anytime anybody walked down the aisle, at any point, he would half stand up, thinking he has to get out of the way because it's their seat that he's sitting in. Every time somebody walked out, "Oh, should I get up? Am I in the way? Is this somebody else's seat?" Every time. It was pretty funny.
Peter's like, "Relax.
Yeah.
Relax, Dad."
He's playing musical chairs over here.
What are they going to do if it was? Yeah.
Yeah, what are they going to do? Hey, you're in my seat.
So
sorry,
we were watching the game, the basketball game on TV.
We were watching the semifinals.
And they won. They're going to the championship game.
Yeah.
And Peter said, "Hey, it's in Kansas City. Let's go." And within 5 minutes, within 5 minutes, he has the offthecollarpodcast.com.
Yeah.
He had tickets to the game.
And that one was the great one. That was, you want to go? What? Yeah, you want to go? I mean, are you serious? Yeah, sure. You want to go? I can buy tickets right now. You said, "Yeah, we can do that." Bought the tickets, and then you said, "We should probably ask Mom." And I said, "Well, I have the tickets." So then we awkwardly walked into the room Mom was in and said, "So hey, about tomorrow."
And they won.
Yeah,
they won.
Isn't that the better to ask forgiveness or to beg forgiveness than ask permission?
That's right.
Number 3.
Don't mistake solitude for loneliness. I mean, this is probably the one that most people are familiar with. The stereotype that introverts prefer having alone time instead of being part of a group. That the desire for solitude doesn't mean they're lonely. So if they do have that time, try not to interrupt it. And pressure them to go out to be sociable. Obviously this is all angled at social interaction. This isn't necessarily job related stuff because, especially thinking of pastoral ministry, there are going to be times where, oh, this is the day off. Yes, and someone needs you to go to the hospital right now. Yep, That makes sense. I could compare it with unplugging someone's phone that's just nearly out of power and then expecting them to work all day without any battery life. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work too well. I think you might have experienced that actually, right? Literally the battery dead.
Right.
Number 2.
So we've got the flip side of that. Don't assume they are not lonely. Since introverts enjoy solitude, people sometimes very wrongly assume that they enjoy being alone. And it's actually kind of the exact opposite. Introverts, just like any other member of humanity, enjoy being around their own kind, their own people. So, as I've got here, if you have been adopted into the pod or flock of an introvert, consider yourself special. Not many are granted such an honor. So it doesn't mean that introverts don't have. Yeah, the introverts do have people they want to be around. They've got their group, but it means if they're separated from that, they are lonely.
And what I find interesting about you is you love your chaotic home.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was a week where they all went to visit family, and I was still here, and it was too quiet. It was too quiet in the house.
And you married someone who is
very talkative.
Very talkative.
Very talkative. Yeah. And I will be completely honest. I miss being on campus because of the group. I miss being able to interact with my class. But I also really enjoy being able to just have time where it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And number 1.
Don't make them repeat explanations. The reason this is number 1 is I've actually had to work through this one quite a bit with a few different people. A lot of the struggles that non-introverts have with understanding the introvert revolve around communication. That's understandable. This is how we interact with each other. But knowing how to articulate clearly but while knowing how to articulate clearly is necessary, the task of listening is also important, sometimes even more so. So this really shouldn't come as a surprise that having to say something again can be very frustrating for the introvert. This isn't necessarily repeating, say, instructions that were missed, or some information where it's like, I wasn't there for that, or I wasn't listening quite, but just conversational information. This is, I think, part of why a lot of introverts don't like chit-chat type small talk. It's repetitive conversations they sometimes tend to become just the same conversation over and over.
Mm-hmm. That
circular discussion where it's idle talk and doesn't really move much beyond, and you kind of forget it once you're done. And the opposite can be then the struggle as well. So if an introvert's sharing something, it probably means it's something really important if they've taken the time to formulate the comment, think about it, and then actually say it. So then having to say it again would imply to them that, oh, you don't care, which isn't always the case.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, a lot of introverts are by nature introspective, which means that they're going to be, rather patient and long-suffering, and usually are good at reading people. Not always. We screw that up too. So they're usually understanding enough. Like, okay, I can work this again.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, they also tend to have a short fuse. I found myself that I probably get angrier quicker because of that than, say, my wife, who is a very feisty, extroverted Irish woman.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, in regards to those things that are that would be deemed important,
mm-hmm.
the idea that, it's like, if this was important, then I shouldn't have to again. And then that adds to the frustration. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing if I go much further in this topic, I'm probably going to dive back into territory we've been over and actually cleared already.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need to do that.
There you go.
I mean, there could easily be more than 12 of these. I have no doubt that everyone's got their opinion on it.
Well, that's been interesting. So not a lot of theology today, except for...
Well, yeah.
But except for, I think there is something to be said about modeling exactly what Jesus talks about.
Yeah.
Of talking with your brother.
Yeah. So a more practical one than some of them lately.
Sure.
Because we've had more theory than practice.
So next time we'll have Berg back.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good place to end.
Sure.
So I'm Bollhagen.
I'm Vicar.
And may your...
Can I just, instead of doing a mayor, can I just play Vicar's Sigh again?
If you leave the explanation right before, sure.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Questions, thoughts, concerns? You can contact us on Facebook at facebook.com/Clerical Errors Podcast, on Twitter at Clerical Errors P for podcast, or email us at feedback@clericalerrors.org. Thanks for listening to Clerical Errors. See you next time.